Chapter 25. Treadon Nelson. Treadon had to sit out at practice, his shoulder locked up, even lifting it an inch. Coach Bracken pointed him to the bench, thin-lipped and silent. Treadon held his shoulder as he watched practice, his stomach twisting as he thought about what his injury might do to the team, to his own future. Jaron was completely distracted, and when Coach Bracken caught him checking his cell phone at a drink break, he benched him too. Sampaio, you're in as running back. Calvin needs some time to get his head in the game. Jaron threw his helmet under the bench and sat, content to watch practice with his eyes on the horizon. Treadon could tell his mind was on what had happened, his dad's business, the accident, everywhere except football. Treadon watched the second-string quarterback jog out onto the field. The guy called for a sweep pass right. Bridger lined up on defense. With his mind distracted, Treadon thought about Gabe and Abigail. They were part of some kind of crusade to save kids from human trafficking or something. He'd misjudged Gabe, that was for sure, but it didn't seem like the kind of job that needed to be kept a secret from him. Sure, there might be drug lords or something that would like to get revenge for messing up their business. Was that all this was? Protection from repercussions? Something from the way his mom reacted made him feel like there was a lot more. He came back to the present when the ball was snapped. He watched as his replacement caught the pitch and backpedaled. Everyone was wound tight after the coach's lecture, and the defense came in fast and hard. The guy panicked and threw the ball to Rachel, but it went wide. Rachel twisted, jumping into the air. Bridger Michaels went in for the tackle, hitting Rachel in the hip and flipping her body up and over, feet in the air, helmet hitting the ground with spine-crushing force. The world seemed to freeze. The movement on the field paused. Rachel didn't move. Then everyone did. Jaron was first and fastest, leaping from the bench and sprinting across the field. He knelt beside her, fists clenched, jaw muscle flexing. The rest of the team made a tight circle. Coach Bracken pushed his way into the circle, yelling at people to back up and give her some space. But even he hesitated to touch her. She lay in a way that any movement might tip the scales in the wrong direction. A shift at the edge of the circle caught Treadon's eyes. He realized that everyone in the circle had stopped moving. Even Coach Bracken, a slender girl in a dark blue hoodie, stepped through the tight huddle, not even having to push anyone aside. They parted for her. She kept her head down, but Treadon knew he would recognize the deep brown eyes if she looked up. Ellie knelt next to Rachel, touching an exposed part of her neck with a single finger. Then she pulled the helmet off Rachel's head and pressed her hands on either side of her cheek. Everyone watched, but no one seemed to see. Ellie stood, her head purposely turned away, like she knew Treadon was watching but wouldn't acknowledge him. She walked through the huddle, his attention pulled back when someone spoke. "She's moving. I think she's okay." Rachel's hand moved up to her face and she let out a groan. She rolled over on her elbows and knees, her ponytail cascading over her face. The movement broke Jaron from his stone prison. He was by her side, hand hovering an inch from her back. "Are you okay?" "I shouldn't have let you play for me. I should have protected you." She shook her head as she pushed herself up onto her knees, shooting Jaron her back-off look. "I don't need you to protect." Jaron cut her off by wrapping his arms around her waist and lifting her to her feet. He kissed her on the mouth, full, passionate. Rachel stood shocked for a moment, and then returned his kiss wholeheartedly, wrapping her fingers around the back of his head. "Cut it out and get your heads back in the game." Coach Bracken's voice was a little weak. He rubbed his eyes like he had gotten some dust in them. Treadon tried to find Ellie, but she was already gone. Miracle number 2, and this time, she'd saved his friend. At lunch, Treadon got his food quickly. He was going to sit by Ellie, whether he could get Rachel and Jaron across the lunchroom or not. He scanned the lunchroom, looking over the heads of the milling students. He was surprised when he saw she wasn't sitting alone. A girl with a nose ring sat next to Ellie. No, not any girl. The girl he'd seen before, Megan. And across from Ellie was a group of skaters, the skaters he'd seen earlier. The one in the middle was the kid that should have had a broken arm. Her lunch group was expanding. Treadon didn't mean to feel the heavy disappointment that settled in his belly. He should be glad she had friends, but the part of him that felt disappointed liked the idea of being special, of being the one who could see an angel when no one else could. And there was another, deeper part of him that wanted to shove everyone away, make sure she was safe, protect her, the way Jaron wanted to protect Rachel. It was wrong, but it was an impulse he struggled to suppress. Rachel could protect herself. Ellie was stronger than he would ever be, but neither of them deserved to be alone. Jaron followed him through the line, quiet and distracted. Treadon was about to leave Jaron to sit wherever Ellie made him, when he caught sight of Rachel's head bobbing through the lunchroom, making a beeline for Ellie's table. "Are you going to sit by Rachel?" Treadon asked. He wondered if Ellie was strong enough to keep Jaren away from Rachel. That would be a feat. Jaren groaned. "One kiss in front of 100 people, and you're automatically labeled as a couple." He exaggerated the last word, but there was a quirk to his lips, and an excitement in his eyes that had been missing the last few days. Rachel sat down across from Megan and Ellie as the skaters got up to leave. Jaren led the way. No distractions or deviations. Jaren sat next to Rachel. Treadon hovered, standing next to Megan. He cleared his throat, but Ellie didn't look up from her food. Jaren tried to keep from touching Rachel, coolly ignoring her. An extreme feat with the lunch stools so close together. Rachel shared her normal acknowledging smile and introduced Jaren to Ellie. Megan looked up at Treadon, her eyes narrowed. "Are you going to sit?" Treadon sat down and tried to get a glimpse of Ellie's reaction, but she just took another bite of yogurt. Rachel continued the conversation, perfectly happy to pretend the kiss hadn't happened. Rachel understood Jaren. He didn't need a girl who begged for attention to suffocate him. He needed someone to play his game. "So, what's it like tutoring the best football player in the school?" Rachel addressed the question to Ellie while sending a barb toward Jaren in the same breath. She was good. Treadon tried to hide a smile as Jaren digested the meaning of what Rachel had said. Jaren's face twisted into a grimace as he fought the urge to defend his status as the better football player while remaining aloof to Rachel's presence. Ellie smiled. Treadon could tell she was aware of the game between the two of them as well. "No, my foster parents don't care about football, and they don't care who I tutor as long as I get home safe." There was an awkward silence. Rachel lost some of her game, really focusing on Ellie. "Where are your real parents?" Rachel asked. Treadon read the pain before Ellie spoke. "They died when I was little. It was a long time ago." "I'm sorry." Megan and Rachel spoke at the same time. Treadon could tell each person was looking for a way to change the subject without making it awkward. "Do you remember them?" Treadon blurted. He regretted the question when he saw the look on her face. "Yes." Her voice was soft, barely loud enough to hear over the din of the lunchroom. "I was 8. "I lost my dad too," Treadon said, "but it was before I can remember." Megan dropped her fork and leaned over to pick it up. Ellie's and Treadon's eyes met for a moment. A small nod from Ellie, an acknowledgement of shared pain. She stood up. "I'll see you later." Megan sat back up, twirling her fork between her fingers. She rested her elbow on the table, head turned obviously in Treadon's direction, staring, calculating. Treadon met her gaze, somehow feeling like he'd been drenched in cold water in too thin of a shirt. Her face was calm, but different than before. Her eyes shone with a new light. Her nose ring was slim, highlighting the freckles along her cheeks. She wore fingerless gloves, exposing her bitten fingernails. She tilted her head. "She saved my life." Megan spoke low, the general hum of the cafeteria almost drowning out her words. Jaren and Rachel were both engaged in conversations with people on either side of them, conveniently ignoring each other. They weren't paying attention to Treadon and Megan. It wasn't the information Treadon expected, but he saw how much it meant to her. "I was going to end it." Her voice was deep, smooth. I'd already made up my mind when she showed up at my door. I wasn't going to let her in. But she came in anyway, kind of pushed through without stopping, so I let her talk. Figured another few minutes of life couldn't hurt. She stayed all night. She talked, then she listened. She made me laugh, then she let me cry. For hours, somehow, she knew I needed help, and she came. When the sun rose, it was like the world was different. Megan stopped, chewing the inside of her cheek. No, the world was the same. I was different. Treadon held his breath while she talked. He let out the air when she finished, and he looked at the empty seat Ellie had left behind. Miracle number 3. Once she helped someone, they noticed her, felt drawn to her. He remembered her fear from the first day. Was doing these things putting her in danger? "I've seen you look at her," Megan said. "She is different than you, and me. If you jerk around with her, I will personally kill you." She said it like a fact. She meant it as a fact. "I believe you," Treadon said. "Good." She picked up her tray and stood, stopping to shoot Treadon one last appraising look. "She needs somebody. I'm just not sure it's you." Megan walked away. The sound of the lunchroom grew louder, and Treadon turned his attention back to Rachel and Jaren. Rachel grabbed her backpack from under the table. She and Jaren still hadn't spoken a word. She caved first, but made it look casual. She gave Jaren a chance to win, but lose at the same time. They're doing a press conference this afternoon. Do you want to go with me? Rachel asked Jaren. As long as I get to drive. Jaren picked up his tray. And we keep it G-rated. Rachel leaned forward, letting her breath hit Jaren's ear. You're not that hard to resist. Jaren, shut up. Good. I want to see what's going on with my company. Jaren walked away, his shoulders tight. Rachel watched him go. What is with you two? Treadon asked. You make out on the field in the morning and then he ignores you at lunch? You can't be okay with that. Rachel shrugged. I've known Jaren a long time. He plays his game, but he hides a lot. Too much. I'm worried about this stuff with the company and his dad. Jaren shouldn't have gotten his hopes up. I always knew things would go back. Back to what? His dad used to be different when Jaren was little. Rachel glanced at the door. Treadon could read her consideration to whether she was betraying Jaren's trust or not. She wanted to keep Jaren's confidence. Treadon respected that. She bit her lip and twisted her sweater zipper. She wanted something else from him, something she was nervous to ask for. How can I help? Treadon realized he'd answered a question she hadn't said out loud. Rachel glanced at him. I mean, what was his dad like before? Rachel looked down. He didn't used to treat Jaren like a human being. He acted like Jaren was a prop or a problem. Something in the way. Xander hired my mom as a nanny when I was a baby, and we've known each other for as long as I can remember. He used to disappear inside that gigantic house of his, hiding and refusing to come out. My mom would freak out. He thought his dad would care if he disappeared. Treadon wished he could stop saying things at the wrong time. Rachel just nodded. Jaren always wanted to impress his dad, but Mr. Calivan never cared. He would come through the front door. Jaren would run to him, jumping up and down, trying to show him something. A coloring page, a ball, a frog. He just wanted his dad to notice him. His dad would brush past him, shove him aside without a word, tell my mom to get him out of the way. Xander never cared if his son was dead or alive. There was anger in Rachel's voice. So what changed? My mom convinced Jaren to go out for football our last year of middle school, Rachel said. She took him to tryouts, but for some reason, Xander Calivan showed up, and something about surgery and company property. He was angry, but then Jaren made this play out on the field. Something incredible. I don't remember what, but it must have been pretty amazing because his dad stopped and watched. That doesn't seem like something that would change years of neglect. Treadon twisted his fork against his tray. It wasn't just football, Rachel said. It was like he'd taken off blinders, like his eyes had been closed until that moment. It was like... She paused. He saw Jaren for the first time. Rachel let out a breath of air, lowering her head with slight embarrassment. I don't know what it was, but Xander Calivan changed. He suddenly wanted to be a dad. After all the hard work was over, but he never really changed. Treadon heard the venom in Rachel's voice. Rachel had been waiting for this to happen, for Xander Calivan to turn away from Jaren again. You want me to watch out for him? You know, you're a sensitive guy, Rachel said, in the best sense of the word. But yeah, I'm worried. Xander never deserved to have Jaren for a son. She turned away with a shrug. Treadon sat alone, thinking about all that had happened and the look on Xander's face as he walked away from the crash. The accident hadn't just convinced Xander to give up the company. Whatever threat Xander had received, it was enough to give up his son a second time.